Hey, what's up? And welcome to the Adventures of Jerkface, a place where we tell silly stories about serious topics. Thanks for checking us out. Each week, we give some thoughts and tips to help you become the best version of you. I'm your host, Brian, and let's get started. In the last episode, I told a story about rumble strips, those little brrps on the side of the road that prompt us to know that we've drifted off course a little bit. This episode is focused on giving you tools to create some rumble strips in your life as a way to start the process of noticing more and more these promptings that are necessary to pay attention to if we're going to make truly sustainable changes in our lives. In today's adventure, we're going to meet the spotter. His job is to spot you, to support you, in the same way a physical trainer at the gym might help you out. Generally, they set you up with new skills and tools to use, tips for things to watch out for, and to spur you on when you feel like quitting. Specifically, they try to get you to do things you could never do on your own. All that to say, the Jerkface spotter asked the question, prompted from the practical perspective. The key question for this episode is, how can we create better ways to notice when we are prompted to see, start, or stop? But before we jump in, I'd like to remind you that if you don't know what the Jerkface story and the Jerkface roadmap are, please check out episodes 1 and 2. The tool we'll be describing today is called the Johari window. When I first heard of this, I thought it was some highly academic idea from philosophers. It's actually a chart made up by two guys named Joe and Harry. It's very helpful to help us understand the relationships that we have with ourselves and with others. And I think it's a great tool to begin to transition through the prompting stage of the Jerkface roadmap. The Johari window is a square with 4 quadrants or rooms that represent how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. This can be used in all types of contexts, but today I would like us to think through these 4 rooms as areas in our life to experience a prompt, a means to greater self-awareness. Room number 1 is called the public room. This is the known self. This room contains things that Jerkface and his friends all know and talk about. This is the self that Jerkface chooses to share with his friends. The second room is called the blind room. This is the area where Jerkface is blind to, but friends 1 and 2 know about. For example, for years they knew he pouted when he didn't get his way, but he is just finding out about it. For Jerkface, pouting has now moved from room 2 to room 1. Room 3 is the unknown room. This room is the area of life that no one knows about. Jerkface doesn't know what's in here, neither do friends 1 or 2. There are many reasons this room exists. Jerkface may never have been exposed to those areas of his personality, or they might be buried deep in the subconscious, or who knows. For example, they all know he pouts, but they haven't figured out that the reason he pouts is that this has been his strategy to get his way since he was a child. That might be a helpful tip for Jerkface to figure out. If not, he might stop pouting, but just become a Jerkface in a new way. I mean, how many different ways are there to get your way? The last room is called the private room. This is the area of the hidden self. These are the things Jerkface knows about himself, but no one else knows or can see them. And in most cases, Jerkface probably works very hard to make sure it stays this way. Looks like he may be due for another prompt. So that's the Johari window. For the remainder of this episode, I'd like to show you some ways that you can use this tool alongside that event, thoughts, feelings, actions chart the counselor used in episode 5 to start noticing the prompts coming your way and/or some ways to continue to stay freshly prompted. Let's look at it again with Jerkface's story at the place where he reacted to his friend when talking about politics. In the first run-through of the story is the pre-prompted Jerkface version. The event is when Jerkface and his friends would talk about politics, and when they disagreed, his action was the famous Jerkface pout. In this moment, this is a room 2 experience. Friend 1 clearly saw what Jerkface was doing, but Jerkface had no clue. He was blind. So let's go back to our chart. We have the event, the political discussion, and we have the behavior, pouting. And we'll have to do some guessing to figure out the thoughts and the emotions. But let's say that for Jerkface, for him to experience respect, he believes you have to agree with him. And if you don't, he feels disrespected and angry. So in these types of situations, he wanted to be liked and not feel angry. And the strategy for him getting his way was to pout. This is what he's done his whole life. So it's as natural as breathing. And like breathing, Jerkface up till now has never even given it a second of thought. The main goal of the prompting stage is to move from room 2, the blind room, to room 1, the public room. It's to begin the transition from never noticing something about ourselves to noticing it. That's it. It would be great if everything changed upon the notice, but frankly, it doesn't. That's why we need rumble strips. Let me get a word of caution here. Once you start to notice your jerk-face tendencies, you'll most likely see them everywhere and all the time. It's like when you buy a new car. You've never saw one of these on the road, and now you see them everywhere. But unlike seeing similar vehicles, these prompts are annoying and depressing and takes a strong effort to live a very difficult paradox. On one end, you can't stay here. Being woke to something's very different than being changed. Being triggered is absolutely needed, but it doesn't automatically transform to transform thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And just as importantly, on the other side of the paradox is to celebrate. Do you understand how much progress one makes the second they see something for the first time? For Jerkface, he lived this way for 25 years. To notice the Jerkface pout is a huge victory. Without it, no transformation would ever take place, and worse, he wouldn't have ever even known why. All that to say, if you've been prompted, stop for a second and celebrate. This is a great victory worthy of some cake and ice cream. And let's keep going. We're on to something here. So how do we figure this out? Is there an area in your life that you're being prompted in regard to not being free? An area of life that you seem to consistently live way differently than you want to live? If you know that, what would be a good rumble strip to start paying attention to? A way to use the chart to move from room 2 to room 1 is to pick one of these areas to be a rumble strip. For Jerkface, it was the action, his pouting. In the story, he connected not being set free to pouting, and he was able to get and receive some great help from friends 1 and 2. Is it the thought? Might a certain recycling thought be used as a great rumble strip? For example, every time this thought comes up, I'm going to treat it as a rumble strip that is letting me know that I'm off course. If Jerkface was going to use this thought, it might be something like, every time I start to think that when someone disagrees with me, it means they don't like me, I'm going to remind myself that I can disagree with someone and be friends. Is it an emotion? For some, this might be the starting point. Are there strong emotions that pop up in your life that might be used as a rumble strip? Emotions are generally morally neutral, but the way that we live them out can have some incredibly powerful consequences for good or bad. For Jerkface, his desire to pout stemmed from feeling disrespected and angry. These would be great rumble strips to stimulate some reflection as to whether one is on or off course. For Jerkface, it was the action. So before we wrap this up, let's take a look at what this looks like when it's used as a rumble strip. So one day, miracle of all miracles, Jerkface noted on his own a time he pouted. He was talking to another friend who disagreed with his take on politics, and when they disagreed, he did the Jerkface pout. Brr, brr, the pout. He noticed the pout, and he used it to remind himself that it was okay to disagree. This didn't mean they couldn't be friends anymore, and he felt peaceful. And he even learned something about friend one's point of view. How about that? Final word on rumble strips. When you bump into the strip in your car, would you ever stop the car, get out, push it home, and then start your trip all over? No, that would be silly. So, on that note, resist the temptation to quit every time you notice a rumble strip, reminding you to notice your thoughts, feelings, or actions. It's there just to help you get back on course. So what's your prompt? What rumble strip are you going to create so that you can notice when you're prompted to see, start, or stop? Thanks for joining us this week on Adventures of Jerkface. Make sure to visit us on social media or on our website, jerkfacepodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Look for Adventures of Jerkface, or if you want to watch the show in video format, check us out on the Jerkface Podcast YouTube channel. And until we meet again, stay prompted, Jerkfaces.